So today, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the Power Apps functions that you really do need to master to wrap your mind around and start using in order to get to the point where you can master Power Apps. So these are the functions I like to run through today, if we could. We'll probably at least go at least an hour, maybe 2 hours, but I'd like to jump and touch on each of these. And if you're not familiar with all these, so hopefully by the end, you're going to feel like you've got a pretty good feeling for when you would use which of these functions in which situation. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. I'm so glad that you guys can hear me now. Okay, so I've brought up Power Apps here. Now, whenever you write a sample app or start doing any type of demoing and using Power Apps functions, you almost need a good set of data to work against, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to direct your guys' attention to a video we probably did like 3 weeks ago, and it's called Power Apps Beginner Topics. And what we did is we went out to that website, Makaru, and we got ourselves a comma-separated value file. I think we've got maybe 1,000 records. And I just like to demonstrate how to bring that into Dataverse initially before we can start tackling a lot of these things, because a lot of these functions do have to do with data. So we want to make sure we have some good data in there to use these functions against. Okay, so here I'm on the home screen within Power Apps. And what I want to do is I'm going to bring up yet another tab here for Power Apps. And instead of going to the apps, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to tables. Okay. And what I want to do is import that student data that we had a few weeks ago. Okay. So if you click on tables, this is the Dataverse end of things within Power Apps. Okay. So we want to import. Now, what I like to do, even if it's from Excel, I like to click on import data because I feel like I've got a lot more options here. Look at all these options. Of course, the first one is Excel, which we'll be using that. There's all kinds of stuff we can import from. Okay, so I'm going to click on Excel Workbook. Okay, then I am going to browse my OneDrive. And let's see what we have here. At the very bottom, I do have mock data that we created in that previous session. I'm going to select that Excel document. Select, and let's see what happens. So this is a wizard, so we're going to have a few next buttons, a few screens to step through. So I'm going to click on next. And you know, the Excel data source is not a good data source. We at least want to bring it into SharePoint, Dataverse, or something like SQL Server, a good relational database management system here. Okay, so I remember we did have a student's worksheet in there, and we formatted it as a table and called it students. Okay, look at this. Here's all of our data. Okay, so we can look at these things and see what we're about to import. I'm going to go ahead and click on next, which should take us to a similar type of screen where it's going to show us the data, it's going to show us the columns and everything. And what I want to do here is I can sort of transform this data. So for example, if I have this Power Apps ID, which is what Power Apps likes to create for Excel data sources, I'm going to go ahead and let's see, name myself here. Okay, very good. What you can do here is you can right click on these and say something like remove columns. You can rename them. You can change the data type. So if you're going to do any of that type of stuff, this is the screen to do it on. And I'm okay with a lot of how it has things set up here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I'm going to click next. And we're going to load this data into a new table. What's the new table name? Well, I'm going to call it my students, or my students, because Dataverse will try to create a plural version of it. Okay, my students. Okay, so if we look around here, we've got the source column, the destination column. So we got the city, email, first name, gender, we have an ID, last name, phone, state, and zip. I think that's a great first step. And we've got all this data in here. I'm going to click on next. Okay, refresh manually. Now, if you wanted it to refresh any data source that we have that's added to that Excel spreadsheet over time, we could set this up to refresh automatically. Okay, we could do that. This is just a one-shot import that I want to do here. So I'm just going to click on publish. And of course, creating objects within the Dataverse, it's going to take a few moments here and there to actually bring this stuff in here. So I'm going to click on custom to see my new table that is creating. So I call it like my students, and I don't see that yet. So I might give it just a little bit more time. And as I'm waiting, I'm going to hit the refresh button here. So as we're waiting, I'm going to keep an eye on the comments here. And it looks like Andre's in here. Sounds like he's excited to be here. Data's King, good morning, everyone. And let's see. Okay, very good. So thanks for joining us today. This morning today, guys. And I am going to hit refresh and one more time, and hopefully it's there. Okay. See, there we have my students. Now, if I click on that table, here is a question from Andre. When should you consider switching from lists? And I assume you're talking about a SharePoint list to Dataverse. I would move over to Dataverse as soon as you can. If you have the licensing for it to use Dataverse, I would say use it right away. Right away. Now, if a lot of your company data is in SharePoint lists, and that would be a huge undertaking and getting all those lists, all that data over into Dataverse. And training people on how to use something else instead of just their SharePoint sites, well, you might need to plan that out. But absolutely, I would recommend taking advantage of your premium licensing if you have it and start using Dataverse as soon as possible. All right. So it did take a little while for these rows to come in here, and you see down here at the bottom. Let me move us down a little bit here. It says 989 additional rows that are there that could be populated. Okay. So we have the data in there. Now I want to create a new Power Apps application, and I'm going to create it from blank. So I'm going to click on create here, blank app, and we'll do a Canvas app. And I'll call this my students. And I'll also say learning 20 functions. Create. Here we go. All right, so let me go back over to our functions list here. So the first thing that I'd like to go over is the if function. Okay, the if function. So there is an app object here that we can look at, and the app object has several properties that we can see here. Okay, now one of them is the onStart screen, the onStart property, and you can just give it a name of a screen there. Okay, now if you leave that blank, it's always going to bring up the very first screen that's at the top of this. I'm going to create a screen for myself, new screen, and I'll call this the boss screen. Okay, it could be developer screen or something like that. And then for screen one, I'm going to bring over a little label, and inside this label, I'm going to use that app object, and I'm going to say active screen name. Okay, so it's going to dynamically pull in the name of the screen there. Okay. Now I'm going to select that. Maybe give it a little bit of a nice background. Okay, and I'm going to select that. I'm going to copy, go over to the boss screen, paste there, and you see it says boss screen. Okay. Now what I would like to do for this app onStart is I'm going to use this if function. Okay, so an if function expects 2 or 3 parameters Okay, so I'm going to type if with 2 parentheses there. Now, the very first parameter is expecting a true or false value. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to see if it's me or not. Okay, so I'll say user.email. If that equals Aaron at powerlabs.us, okay, then I want the screen that it goes to be the boss screen. Okay. I'm going to open this up a little bit. Okay, so we have 2 or 3 parameters here for the if. So this equal sign is what's called an operator. It takes what's on the right side and the left side almost as parameters, okay? And it compares those two things and it's going to return a true or false value, okay? And if it is true, it's going to return this. Otherwise, if that's not me, I want it just to go to screen 1, okay? So I'm going to save this. This is the first time I've saved this, so and then publish. Now I'll bring up a new tab, Power Apps, bring it over here. And what I'm going to hope is that I see my project there. Sometimes it takes a few moments for those new projects to show up. Now I'm just going to click on this ellipsis, these 3 dots, and I'm going to hit play. Okay, now it says screen 1. So it looks like we've got a little bit of an error here. Okay, so what should have happened here?
What'd you do, Darren?
I don't know. Sometimes we got to figure out when code goes wrong because a lot of times code doesn't go right, right?
I need a bigger screen. I can't see that.
Yeah. Okay. So let me.
Oh, there you go. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Look at that. So now I wonder if I spelled everything powerlabs.us. Okay. Now what I can do is I can select this user email and it says text. Okay. So let's just do some testing and troubleshooting here. And what I can do is move us to the bottom. I'll make things a little bigger there. What I want to do is I want to create a few more labels here. So there's one, and here's another. So for this first one, what I want to do is say user with parentheses, and I'll say email. Okay. So Darren at Power Labs. Now, there's some cases when I just don't type things in right. I'm going to hit Control C. Okay. Now over here in the app, should be it. Exactly the same. Okay. So the boss screen should say boss screen. And then something else I'll do is I'll look at this. Are these 2 things the same? And it says true. All right. So I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to republish. Sometimes there is a delay, guys. Whenever you publish an app, it might take a few minutes for a user. If they were to go out right when you hit publish, chances are they're not seeing the absolute latest version, okay? So I'll just give it a moment here, and I'll go back out to...
Yeah, that happened to me just a little while ago. I was working on some nasty code, and not near as hard as the stuff Lou was working on the other day, but it was still nasty. And I made some changes, and I knew that it was right. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with this code, and it would not take it. It was redlining all over the place, and then I left and came back in, and it was just beautiful. So it's just really funny how sometimes it just doesn't register, when you're putting that stuff in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and click refresh, and let's see if it... oh, look at this. You're using an old version of the app. Hit refresh to the latest version. Okay, so I'm going to hit refresh.
Yeah, and that's, the reason why that's happening is because we are literally working live over a cloud. This is cloud development. This is 100% cloud development. This is not, it's really an amazing thing that we're doing here. But that's one of the consequences of that is we've got to wait for a second sometimes.
Yeah. So I was having a brain fart here, guys. It's not on start. That's where you put your code that you want to have executed whenever the app starts up. They created
Start
a
screen.
start screen. I thought I was on start screen. So so thank you, Sid. That was a brain fart on me. My bad. So absolutely, yeah, that should be. In fact, Microsoft made a change. It was probably maybe a year and a half ago, where you could not put a navigate function. You cannot use navigate function within OnStart. So they created the start screen. And for some reason, I thought I was using the start screen there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save.
It's early.
It is early. I don't think my caffeine's kicked in just yet. Back here, I'm going to hit refresh. There is a newer version. Okay. Okay, there we go. The boss screen. Okay. So going back to our function list. So if is a really good function to really master if you want to master the Power Apps platform. Okay. So there, as these functions I've listed off, there are some that have to do with each other. Okay. So switch is another way of doing what's called branching, which is what if does. So if this condition is true or false, then do this. Otherwise, go do this. And it's a way of branching code. Okay, so switch allows you to do the same thing, but if you have, let's say, you could have nested ifs, or you've got a lot of different conditions to check, not just one, but several, then you might want to use the switch function. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say, you guys, that if is not just important. It's you have to do it. There's no programming without conditional branching. You've got to make conditions. So that is like the number one thing to learn is that if function. It really is. Can't do it. Yep.
So it looks like Amber's trying to get in. Let me make sure. So I'm going to share this link here. I want to share. So right now, just the accelerator students are able to come on as panelists. So here is the link to that. So the accelerator students would have access to actually view that link there. So Amber, yeah, please click on that link, and there's a link to join the live stream. Okay. So very good. It'd be great to have you on. Okay. So let's go ahead and move over to switch. Okay. So while we're looking at this, we might have something like an app admin screen. Okay, so I'll create a new one here, and I will. There you go. Amber, I see you on. If you actually want to be brought on to the stream and be able to talk, just show your video, and I'll bring you on. Okay. All right. Very good. So this one here, I'm going to call this app admin screen. And then what I want to do in the app start screen. Okay. Now what we could do is do, well, if email, the email equals, okay. Then what we could do is say app admin screen, then do this screen one. Okay, so that's a way if you have multiple things you can nest your if statements. Okay, so probably a better way of doing this, I'm going to copy that and have it down here. I want to delete your code that you spent so much time to create, right? So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to use switch. Okay, and the first parameter of switch is what is going to be compared. Okay, so we're just going to look at the user email. And
hey, Darren. Darren, do you think when you get done looking at the switch, could we go back and look at that nest and let's talk about that nest with the if? Let's slow that down and talk about that. Break it down a little bit. You think that might be good for these guys? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me finish the switch here. So we've got.
Sure.
We're going to look at that user email. Now, if it is Darren, okay, then we want the screen boss screen. Now, string literal should be in double quotes, so make sure I get some double quotes in here.
And that's another topic, string literals. Strings and string literals.
Okay. So,
we are going to be doing so much work with strings at some point.
yeah, so I'm going to hover over this red squiggly switch is unknown or supported function. It probably would help if I spelled it right? Yeah. Yeah, very good. All right, so if it is Darren, it's going to go here. If it's Kurt, it's going to go at app-admin. Otherwise, this is like the else. If none of these other conditions are met and compared to these, this email, then it's just going to go to the screen 1. Okay, so now I'm going to save this and publish it. It should work exactly the same way. Now, new version app is coming. We'll let you know when it's available. Okay. Well, this is an improvement as Microsoft is adding and improving Power Apps. This is a great thing that they're actually doing this.
Yeah.
Because I've had to implement little features in there, like little version numbers at the bottom. If they don't see the latest version, then they know they don't have it. So it seems to be working the same way. So we've got that. Okay, so any questions on Switch before we go back to the if function and talk about nesting and all that type of stuff?
You know, I would like to talk a little bit about good programming practices within that switch. I don't know if this is a good place to do it or not. I don't want to confuse people within it.
If it just takes like a minute or two, I say we jump into it. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, especially when it comes to Switch, you know, in every language, I don't care what language we're working with, you've got some sort of version of it. You've got an on case, or in this case, it's a switch where you've got a selection of a list of conditional things that you could go down. You know, like Darren just showed right there. So one of the things that I was taught early on is to be in total control of your programs, and so that else, that when he has that, otherwise you'll notice he's got 3 options there. He's got screen. The first option on the switch is Darren. Else it's going to be Kurt. And then you've got otherwise. In other words, if there's anything else, if nothing else fits, go there. Well, then when you have that, that's a hint that you don't have control of your program, because that means that something else could be going in there that is not part of that condition. So we should never, in my world, this is Kurt's world, and we should never use the else in that. There should not be another, we should make a range. In other words, before you go into that switch, you have a condition before you even go into the switch to make sure that you're within a range that's good. Don't even go in there unless you have the items you want. In other words, in this case, it would be if it's not Darren or Kurt, you don't even go in there. Don't even try to go in there, you know, because we don't want to have a situation where it might be somebody else. So that's just something to kind of remember and think about when you're writing your programs. Have total control of your system, you know.
I'm trying to think of a good example here. This might be a good example. So this switch statement, you might have dozens or, you know, more different switch comparisons in here. Yeah. So something I remember, Kurt, you taught me is, well, let's go ahead and check to see if this little user email has anything in it.
There, okay. Beautiful. That's perfect.
So we could say is blank.
Make sure it's not empty before you even go.
Put that in there. Yeah. And we'll say like the bang operator, or we could say not.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, you guys, when he's saying not, there's 2 different versions you can use in some cases, like Power Apps. They're trying to help you make it so that whatever you're used to dealing with. So that's why you have 2 different ways of saying not. If you can use the bang operator in some of the old programming languages, that's representation of not. Or if you come from like a Visual Basic or an Excel background, the not, not, you spell it out, you know. So that's what's going on there.
So I just created a screen called Something Went Wrong. And I'm going to copy the name of that screen. Okay. So as long as they have an email that's returned, then it's going to go ahead and look at that. Otherwise, I'm just going to send them over to something went wrong screen.
Look at that. That's beautiful.
Okay. You like that?
That's a good, slick programming practice right there.
According to Kurt, you could have saved yourself quite a bit of processing there just to check, just to sort of validate, like, should we even be going through all these switch evaluations? Nope. So you guys pick up on that? People pay big money for this.
And there's one other thing about that. You could be writing this program for General Motors. I like to use General Motors because they just got they're huge, right? So you might be processing 5 million records. You might not just 3 or 4 records. So think about that. If your program is going through 5 million records and you're going through a bunch of stuff that's not in there, well, now you're using a lot of computer time that you don't need to be using. And I know computers are fast, and I know processes are fast, but so is the world. The world's getting big and fast, so you need all that time. You need them processing slices. So don't waste processor time. Don't waste processor resources on bad data, right?
I have a question. In that situation, so I mean, you could you shorten that down to where they would just look as, like, for instance, General Motors or whatever, that it had that, at generalmotors.com, and that's the only way you could get into the app.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To keep other outsiders from being able to use it. Is that where you're kind of going with that, or?
Oh, no. What I was talking about was like, okay, so let's just say you're processing these 2 people, mm-hmm. and against 5 million records. Let's just say that there's some kind of an input. Maybe we're not doing an email, or maybe we're sending out emails. I don't know. But we're processing that against 5 million. Maybe we're checking 5 million records within that. Maybe we have to do something. Maybe we're not just sending out an email. Maybe we're actually looking at the data and we're updating data tables before we send the email out. I'm just trying to let you guys know that you might be writing a program that could be hitting that database a lot. And if you've got a lot of erroneous data in there, then you're wasting a lot of resources. Kind of what I'm trying to say in that. But you're right in your case, and that's another way. Your thinking is exactly right, Lou. You want to narrow down your scope so that you don't even touch those 5 million records. You're just going to talk about Darren or Kurt, or you're not going to go into General Motors unless you're part of that operation. So that's right.
Nick says over the private chat, that's very good, Kurt. Yeah. So we do need to keep moving on. We have 18 other functions to cover, and we're already 30 minutes in. So I would like to sort of move more. Now, Kurt, maybe what we can do is we can have a whole video, a whole session on, let's just call it branching, where we really delve into, because I think there was more stuff you wanted to talk about, the if and nesting. And we could sit here and probably talk at least a whole hour on this, but I wanted to keep this sort of light, and we touch on each one so people are exposed to all 20 of these functions and feel like they're at least on their road to getting Power Apps down.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back and look at our function list. So we've talked about if, we talked about switch. What about navigate? Well, chances are you guys have probably already have started to use navigate. If you do a search for Darren Neese navigate, I've got a really good video on that. But here is something that we might want to do here in this application as we've been building this, is if I go to the boss screen, perhaps I might want to have a button that goes back to navigate, and it's the name of the screen. So screen 1. Okay. So the navigate function takes 3 parameters. Okay. Now, the first one is required. That's the name of the screen that you want to navigate to. Now, if the screen does have spaces, and really your screens should have spaces because it needs to be very human readable, especially readable by, screen readers. Okay. So if you don't have spaces in there, it's going to have a hard time understanding how to pronounce those words. So you see we have app admin screen, something went wrong. They've got spaces in there. You'll need to put single quotes around them. Okay. So if I go here to app admin, it's got the single quotes in there. All right. So I'm going to hit back. And of course, the undo doesn't work very well, does it? I'm going to try to redo, okay, and type in here screen 1.
You know, that undo, I've done that a lot. I'll hit that undo and it won't do anything. And it's like, what are you doing? But if you're patient, a lot of times it'll actually undo it. It just takes time. It's got, I don't know. It's like it's slow sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. In this case, I went from screen one to the app admin, and then I hit back in order just to go back to screen one, but it went like back twice. So
Okay.
I don't think I hit it twice. So yeah, it's just a little frustrating. So, now, if I were to click on this button, it's going to take me back. Okay. And then, of course, something you should always learn while talking about the navigate. It's a very simple function, which is back, that will navigate back. So I'm going to double click on this button and say back. So it's properly labeled there.
Look how hard this is, guys. It's just so hard, isn't it? I mean, that in the old days, that would have taken 8 hours.
This is great stuff. So I can hit back and that works. Okay. Now, well, since we're talking about the navigate and we want you guys to master these functions. So the first parameter is required. That's the name of the screen. The second parameter is the transition. Now, used to be, my favorite one is just fade. Always thought that looked nice. But look at this. Here is screen transition.fade. Now, used to be, and it looks like someone here in the chat says lost. Can you guys still hear me okay? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, hear you
good. Okay, very good. So if I just leave that as fade, it's like, I don't know what that is. You have to give that enumerated value or fully qualify what it is you're trying to say. Screen transition.fade.
And that's another topic we'll have to bring up for a while, is enumerated values.
Yeah.
If you guys are getting confused by that, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And then Chris Buffer here, I'm looking for you, Chris, and the panelists. I don't see us, so I'm just going to answer your questions here on the screen. How does back differ from navigate? So navigate will take you to a specific screen that you name, and back will always take you back one screen. So that's the difference. Sort of like going forward and going back in a way.
So it's like your little left caret arrow on your phone, right? Where it just goes back one level, right?
Yeah.
The backwards.
Yeah, if you use an Android.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Chris, did that answer your question okay? If not, please maybe clarify how we could answer that better there. Okay, so going back here, so we got fade. Now, if I click off of this, it just says fade. But if I click in here, it puts that screen transition.fade. And then the third parameter is almost like doing an update context for the screen you're going to. So you have these curly braces there where you can specify all these values, all these local variables for that new screen. Okay, so you could say, okay, we're going to screen one, and I could say loc, because it's going to be a local variable, is is boss, and I'll set that to true. Okay, so there's a lot more to navigate than just having it go to a particular screen. So if I go over here to screen, and I'll make a copy of this label here, and I'll say is boss, and I'll splice in local variable is boss. Because on some other screen we have a navigate and we name off a local variable. It actually creates that local variable here on this screen. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so right here it says I'm not a boss, but if I save this, over here to boss, and I were to click on this, oh, it is true because I came from that other screen and it set that up to be true. And Data is King says, back remembers how many screens back. I do not have that answer.
I think so. I think it is recursive. I think it's recursive.
How many times? I think he's asking how many screens back. So if we have 100 screens and we go from screen 1, 2, 3, 4, right, 5, and we go all the way to 100, if each screen has a back button, will it take us all the way back to 1?
It seems like it does. When I tried that, when I was trying to learn how to do that, I did that. I believe it is recursive, which means it remembers where it came from. So it's going to go back to back to back to back. Yeah. It's easy enough to test it though, you know.
Well, what I found here is when you are just clicking around the different screens, that isn't necessarily keeping track of what screen you came from last. Okay, so if I go here, I click on this button to go to screen 1.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, if I click on,
yeah,
I'm
sorry.
Go ahead.
But when you use the navigate, I think it does. When you're using navigate, I think it does keep track of that though. But yeah, I don't think so. When you're clicking around, I don't think it's going to.
So if I click back right now, I was on the 3rd and the 4th screen. It took me back to the 2nd screen. Okay. So if you just click around, it's not going to keep track of that. But if let's add another button here. Say home. Okay. This one will be, I can say app admin. Of course, do you see what happened? I hit tab and it blinked everything. I'm going to Control Z. Hopefully I get all my stuff back. Nope. Control Z is not working. Isn't that fun? All right, let's try this again. So you give it a space before and after, and it will say app admin screen. Gee whiz, man. I guess they changed it again to whatever. I don't need to pass parameters. I just want it to go to the next screen. That's fine. App admin.
Yeah.
And then bring these 2 buttons over here. And this one will go. What's wrong? Okay. Start here. I'll run it. I'll go home. Then I'll go back. And I'll go to app admin. And then I'll go to this wrong screen. So I've gone to all of them. So I'll hit back. And I don't have a back screen here. That's what's great about having a navigational system. So you're not copying and pasting random buttons all over the place to get around, right?
Right. Now my test, if you guys were wondering about that side, is if let's say you have 4 levels deep of screens. Screen 1 went to screen 2, that went to screen 3, that went to screen 4. If you hit back, it'll remember that going backwards too. It'll take that all the way deep, all the way back, just by hitting the back. Yeah.
And Chris says, amazing. Very good. Okay, so let's go back to our function list. So we've done navigate. And now that we're getting into these other functions, I'd almost like to pull up some data here. And let's go. I'm just going to create a new screen. So I've got something new to work with. And I'll just call this data. And from screen 1, create a new button here. I double click on that button and type in data. Navigate. That is not a good screen name. We should probably call it data screen. And someone might be asking, okay, now that you rename that screen and you go back home, in this little data button, did it rename it? And it did. That's the beauty of Power Apps.
Absolutely did.
Where sometimes you don't get that in traditional software development, other languages, you know.
That's so nice too, because when you start doing complex programs and you've got that in about 40 or 50 different places, that's nice. You don't miss it then.
Yeah. So here on this screen here, it's the 5th screen, data screen. I want to make sure I've got some data in here. So let's add data, and it's going to be the one that we imported. And I think I called it my customers or my students, something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here. Yeah, my students. There we go. It's going to pull that in. We all know that galleries are a lot better than data tables, right? What I find interesting is this data table has been out there for a long time. And
it's still under preview. Still under preview.
Is Gmail still in its beta I remember Gmail was in its beta for like years. I always go with blank ones, typically the vertical ones, the ones that go down. Okay, so let's pull in some data here, and I'm going to use that my students data. Okay, of course we don't have any controls yet, so I'm going to maximize this, or almost maximize it.
Now the reason why you like to go down that you use the blank one is because if you don't, it populates it with a lot of stuff, right? And you want to just say, look, I don't want to be messing with all that, taking all that out to put my own stuff in, right?
Yeah. So if I said gallery, vertical gallery.
Yeah, see how it puts that stuff in there?
So let's say, well, I don't need an image in my gallery, and you take that out. Okay. And it's like, well, I don't want this, or I don't want that.
Right.
They just recently changed it, but okay, so here's a perfect example of why I don't like to do that. Okay, now we have an error. What do I do here? So if you're a beginner trying to bring over a gallery and you don't want certain things, so now you're like more lost rather than if you had just started with a blank slate here, and it gives you directions. Add an item. So if you click on this, add an item, boom, there is what's in the name column. Okay. Looking at the private chat over here from Amber. Darren, you want to use responsive screen design in this? If so, it's going to be looking lit fire. So we did cover responsive design last Saturday with Matthew Devaney. If you want to go check that out, guys. But yeah, I'm not going to try to mix in responsive design here with what I'm doing. Do you guys hear any thunder over my mic at all? There is an absolute horrible storm going on right now. I'm just wondering if you guys are experiencing that. Yeah. Just making sure it's not overtaking my microphone here. But yeah, it's pretty loud. Okay. So, and you notice here on the gallery, you can always change everything on what's being repeated in the gallery with what you change here in the very first one. Okay. So a lot of times I do like to give a little border to these labels here inside the gallery so I can see what's going on more. Okay,
I think this gallery object is the biggest magic for Power Apps out of all of it.
It's great.
This is amazing. Yeah, you can't live without that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, I don't really care about the ID, but I am going to say first name. And I'm going to make this 250 and say this item dot last name. Okay. We got people's names in there. I'm going to copy and paste. What other type of stuff do we have in here? We do have their phone. Yeah, we got their phone. That may not be need to be so wide. So let's do something like 200 there. Right. And let's do a copy and paste. What other type of good stuff do we have there? That around. Okay, let's go look at our data just momentarily. Don't want to know when it's created on. City, email, first name, gender, last name, phone, state, and I think we've got zip down there. Those are all the columns that we sort of created there. Okay. So I'm going to move this up on my other screen so I can see it. Okay. Let's do email. And email probably needs to be a little bit longer. Okay. Sometimes people's emails are really long. Let's also go throw in gender. Okay, there we go. And phone, got the email. Maybe we'll add in, I think that might be good for now. Okay, so we can actually look, we have some good data here. And if we add in, let's say a label here, and how many records do we have in here? So we could say count rows. Okay. Supposedly we only have 0 rows. Does that seem right to you guys? Well, odd. My students, count rows. Okay, that's a little strange. Dates currency. So I'll just leave that there for a second and see if that updates hopefully soon. Otherwise, if I just go in here and refresh, let's see what that does for me, if that helps us out at all. Okay, so let's look at the functions here. So text. Let's look at text. So text will take a value and turn it into text. Okay, so if you have a number and you want to treat it as if it's a string, you can use the text function to do that. Okay, so another thing that you can do is you can change the format. So sometimes you might think it's a format function. It can be used as that. So if I take a look at created on, okay, there is a date time string or a date time value. And if we say text, what we're going to do is we're going to convert that to a string. Now, visually, that really didn't do anything to it. Okay. But what we could do is use a second parameter, which is the format. So if we're not interested in the time, we're only interested in the year. We could say for lives, that will give us the year. And we could do our own little format here. So maybe a dash, month, dash, day. Okay, we could do that. And of course, that data was just imported earlier today. Let's see some variant information here, because it's all the same for the date. Let's say per hour, minute, second. Okay. Then there's also millisecond that you can use with the FF. Doesn't look like it's giving us anything there.
And again, you guys, this is a whole nother topic. This text function is so important and it's so big that we could talk for maybe 2 weeks on this. You know, this is a really big topic here. Yep.
Yeah. So that's, go ahead.
I was going to say, are you going to show them some of the time format stuff that the date formats you can use on that, the enumerated features?
Sure. Too? Which one? Yeah. Which one do you want to use here?
Well, you could use you could talk about the short date, the date time format.
Okay. Short date.
Yeah. Let's see how you got date time format. You got short date, date time, all those.
Good. Short date time. You see that it actually brings in the AM, PM type of thing.
Yeah.
So something that if you liked what I had in there before, maybe you had your own format. So let's say hour, minute, second. If you say AM, PM, it should actually say either AM, PM for you. That's a little.
I never knew that. That's good stuff there. That's kind of cool.
So any questions about the text function? I mean, we could look up the documentation and talk about all the different variations that you can have in text. But if you want to format text a certain way, or what's called typecasting in other programming languages. So you want to take one type, say a number, turn it into a string or to text. Yeah, use that text function. What's the opposite from text? Let's say you've got a phone number and you just want the numeric values out of it. Does anybody know the function to use for that? I don't have it on my list here, but it is related to that one. Okay, so that is value. So I wonder what would happen if I were to say value to this. Okay, it doesn't like it because it has all those other.
It's too big. Yeah, too much stuff.
Too much stuff. Yeah. So if we did have a number here, without that. Now I could do substitute and substitute all those the plus signs and the parentheses and everything out, and then use value on that if I wanted to. But yeah, value is the way to turn a string back into a numeric value. Okay. All right. So moving on here. So we got text. What about split? Somebody know what split does?
That's one that I always have trouble with. I'm glad you're going to be talking about this one.
Yeah. So let's say you've got a bunch of text, big string, and you want to split things out. And let's say you might want to create an array based on that. Okay. So for example, I'm looking at this email and I don't care about their domain. I just want to grab their username. Okay. So typically people's usernames, when they log on to a network, it's their email address. Okay. Or the part right before the @ sign. Okay. Yeah. So let me go in here and actually utilize this function. So here's an email and I want to split this thing up. We're going to split it up. The very first parameter is the text that you want to split up. Second parameter is the separator. Well, I want to separate it based on an @ sign. Okay. Now we're going to get an error here because a label is going to display one string. That's what it's expecting. And pretty much we gave it you see this data type, a table. It's giving us a table value, a single column table. Now, what I'm interested in, so it's going to give us, let's say my email address, darren@powerlabs.us. Okay. And it's probably not even going to have that @ sign in the middle. It's going to be Darren and powerlabs.us will be the two items within that table. And I'm only interested in that first part. Well, how do we get at the first part? We can just use the function first. Give me the first item out of that. See if that works at all. Okay. So what that's going to do is going to give us the very first record out of that table. And now that we have that first record, we can say dot value. So a lot of times when Power Apps gives you a single column table, that column name will be value, sometimes result. Okay. So there you go. We got to have all their usernames there. Now, if we wanted the other one, we could have said last. Let's say we're only interested in like what organization or what website they're coming from. We could have done that. We could have just got their domain name. Isn't that sort of cool there? And then also what we could do, we could use a function called launch. It's a little similar to navigate, but it allows you to launch to something outside the application. So this is maybe a cool little exercise on the click event of this thing on the on select. What we could do is say launch, and we could launch out to self.text. Wonder if that would work out. If you want to make it look like a link, what you're going to do is say blue. Okay, there we go. So now if I run it, I want to make sure I save it just in case it opens up in the current window there. Click on it. Look at that. Studio Express.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's some stuff people would pay big money for right there, I think. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, so I'm keeping an eye on the comments here. Yeah, Data's King says splits a string. Andre says I use split lots in Power Automate for splitting and reformatting dates. Okay, very good. Yeah. And what instance have you used Power Automate from Power Apps? Oh, this was a great topic that was covered this last Thursday in the Accelerator program. So we had a whole 2-hour crash course on Power Automate from our very own Mary.
That was with the Accelerator students that we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From the Accelerator program. Yeah.
Yeah, I might actually release like a slimmed down edited version of that just to give people a taste for what we did there on Thursday. Yeah. But the main reasons I use Power Automate is when I can't do something in Power Apps. So if I need something kicked off in the middle of the night, nobody's in my app to click on a button to fire something off or some event that I can respond to. You almost have to use a Power Automate flow to do that. Also, if you want to create files, and work with OneDrive, create files and process things, and it's great for that as well. So just keeping an eye on everything here.
Back to the functions that we're working on here today too. For you Power Accelerator students, we have an overview. We have 3 videos out right now, an overview where we go into a lot of the details of many of these functions, and we're going to be creating more detailed videos on each and every function that we have in Power Apps. So today is just kind of an overview of things. It's kind of like just getting you guys what I want to call exposed to these functions, and we talk a little bit about it. But for you Power Accelerator students, we're going to be getting very deep into the weeds on these functions. Why, how you use these things, So just wanted to take a moment to talk about that.
Yeah. So that's how you split things out. And then Concat actually does the opposite. Okay. So it takes several things and turns it into a string. So for example, if I were to have a label on here, and maybe it would be a long label. Okay. So we could do something in here like we want to display maybe the first 20 people's names in there just to let people know. Maybe there's a reason to do that, but you could take a table of values. So let me go ahead and type in that concat. Okay. And we want to grab, okay, here's a gallery 1. I'm just going to use that gallery 1 dot all items. Okay. And perhaps we'll only want to use the first 20. Well, there's a function called first in. Isn't that interesting? First in. And we'll say, well, just give me the first 20 items. Okay. That's how you would do that. Okay. So we're going to go through those items, and then the expression will be, what do we want to do with this stuff? Okay. Well, I'm looking for first name. We have a first name in the data source. And let's go ahead and splice in last name. And then I can tell you what would be a good example of doing this. Let's say you're going to send an email to the first 20 people. Okay.
Yeah.
Email. And then we want to concatenate a little semicolon. Well, if you have a bunch of email addresses separated by semicolons, then an email provider, a service will understand, okay, these are separated emails. So we need to send it off to all these people between the semicolons there. Okay. So we'll concatenate all those together, separated with semicolons, and there they all are.
I distinctly remember this problem happening about a week ago with somebody.
Yeah.
Where they were trying to splice names in to an email. I think Nick might remember that too. I think this is a way to handle that. Yeah.
Very good. Now, if you're looking at this output and you're like, well, I just want one line at a time. If I want to do something instead of those semicolons, well, there is a function called char, and you can give it an ASCII character here of 13, and it's going to give you a little carriage return. Look at that. Isn't that neat? So there's an ASCII code for, if you just do a Google search on ASCII codes. So there's an ASCII code for pretty much anything you can type on the keyboard. Okay. And 13 just happens to be a carriage return. I think 10 is a carriage return and 13 is a line feed, if I'm not mistaken.
No, 10 was the line feed and 13 is the carriage return. That's right. You were right. Okay. And I guess I just want to explain that just a little bit, flesh that out just a little bit. So people that get confused with that. So every, computers operate on numeric values, right? So, but we work off of the text, we work off of, letters. And so what they've done is they've represented each letter with and special characters like semicolons with a numeric value so that the computer can recognize that. And you can actually use that for different languages as well. So the computer represents that in numbers. So like he just said, the carriage return is 13. They gave it they gave that a numeric value so the computer recognizes when you give it a value of 13, that's going to be a carriage return. Or if you type in the capital 65, if you put in the letter 65 in there, it's going to give you a capital A. If you subtract 32 from that, it's going to give you a lowercase a. And so it's a great way to manipulate ordinal data, with that ASCII. And again, that's something it's a big, long discussion we can have sometime down the road. But it's an important one for you guys to remember what's really happening underneath the surface of these apps when you start putting those things in there, especially when you're working with strings.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to we have collections and patch, collect, clear, collect, all kinds of stuff to cover now. The first thing I want to do is cover patch just real quick here. Got patch. Now I have a whole video on this. If you do a search for Darren Neese patch, it'll come right up. And I take 30 minutes on the patch function. I think it's one of the most important functions to master. So you guys are probably already familiar with this, but I'm going to go over it here. So I'll say patch, and then we've got my students. Okay. So the very first parameter is expecting that data source. Okay. The second parameter will be the record that we want to patch. Well, let's just create a new record. And we do that by using a function called defaults. And the parameter that you give defaults is the name of the data source. So again, we're going to have my students in there. So it's going to go out to the data source and say, hey, give me all the default values for a new record. So that's essentially what it's doing. And then as the third parameter for the patch, we're going to name off all the columns that we want to specify and throw in the values for those. Okay. So let's say first name. Let's create a John, and we'll say last name. So do that. And let's go ahead and run it and see if that works. Okay, get out. I don't see any red squigglies. That's good. So the question is it there? Easy way we could do that is we can go over here to edit data. And let me do a search for filter by. Okay, there's John. Where's the last name? There's John Doe. So it did work. Okay, very good. So the patch is working. Now I wanted to touch on patch, which is number 9, before I talked about collect and clear collect. Okay, so what is a collection? Before we start talking about collect and clear collect, we need to understand what a collection is. It's a table that's in memory in your Power Apps application that isn't necessarily bound to a data source. So right here, we've got a data source in Dataverse. It's got the data there. That's where the data resides. And we can query it. We can bring it over. If we change something, it changes the data source. But a collection is we could get a whole collection of everyone, and then we could actually patch that collection. But that doesn't necessarily mean the data source is going to be updated. It's an in-memory variable that you use. Okay, so let me create another button here. Any questions about this patch that I did here before I move on to collect and clear collect? Okay, so here's patch. I'm going to say collect. Now, the only difference between collect and clear collect is that you're going to collect one or more things into a table, into that collection at once. Okay, now if you say clear collect, it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to clear it out or delete it before it starts adding it. And then, of course, there is another function out there called clear, and you give it a name of a collection. It'll just clear it out. So Here's collect. And what I want to do here is and collect is a little bit like using a variable. The very first parameter is the collection name. So if this is the first time that you've used collect here in the application, you're sort of defining that collection. You know how you use set. First time you use set, you're creating a variable and you're defining it at the same time. So you should always start your collections with COL. Okay, and I'll call this new students. Okay, so that's that. Now you can provide your own values here. You could say first name equals new test person. And then for the last name, new last name. Now, if I double click on this collection, it should show me what's in there. You see it says data type table. Okay. Now, if I hit that downward chevron, there's no data in there. Okay. So if I were to just hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, sort of runs the app right here where it's at. I'm going to click on that collect once, twice, 3 times. Okay. I'm going to release my Alt key, open up the code window and double click on that student, that little variable there. Look at this. New test person, new last name. So it just inserted it 3 times for us. Okay. What's great about using collections along with patch is that we could patch or update the data source with those 3 records all at once. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this patch. I'm going to copy and paste that patch button here. And I'm going to say patch collection. Okay.
This is a place where I always struggle with. I can never get it to work right where I'm wanting to just patch in to a data source from the collection. What you're doing right here. I always struggle with this one.
Yeah. I do see a question out here. It says, iTube Hirschberg, is there a limit to the number of records in the collection? No. So you do have a limit of bringing over 2,000 records from a data source. So that is a hard and fast limit. Now, by default, it's 500 within a project. So if you go over here and look at settings for a project, you'll notice here it's by default it's 500. You could set that at max to 2,000. Okay, so sometimes people, they want to work with more than 2,000 records at a time, and what they'll do is they'll go do a query and maybe get the first 2,000 records, and then they'll have another thing, or maybe an iteration of a loop, or go get the other 2,000 until they load up maybe all 10,000. I've never heard of a limit to the collection. I think really what the limit is how much memory do you have there that your browser can utilize. So that might be a good little test of like you just going and getting 2,000 records at a time. Or actually just starting to create your own collection. Now, it also might have to do with how wide your collection is. So if you've got 100 different columns and you've got data for each of those columns, and if your limit is actually the memory, you're going to fill up the memory faster, the fatter or the more wider the collection is with all the different columns.
Yeah, if you've got pictures in there, it's going to eat up some memory really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so what I can do here, what's so beautiful about the patch is I can patch that, and then what I could do is I could just use that little collection that we have, hold new students. Okay, and what is it telling me here? It has some invalid arguments. Cannot use a non-record value in this context. And I wonder if they have changed how this works.
This is where I always have trouble with right here.
Yeah.
I hope you can fix it. Fix it, Darren.
Okay. And Andre says, I'm assuming SQL is the most efficient solution to that. Well, SQL is a different topic that maybe we'll get into a different session. I know I plan on having a whole series of stuff on Azure, on creating a SQL Server database, and actually jumping to start using some structured query language. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm real excited about that.
Okay, so I'm used to this working. So this collection, there's an error in this formula. Try revising the formula and running it again. Okay, well, I'm wondering is if I click on this second one here, do I still have the data there? And I do. Okay, and I think maybe in Dataverse, it really is requiring the name. You know how SharePoint has that column called title and always likes that title to be used. So let's put in
you
a
know
name
what?
here.
I bet you're right. I bet that's going to do it. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to put in here, I think it's a numeric value in this one. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to want to see if I can do this, do a max on that, not the collection, but I want to say my students. And the column that I want to look at is the name. It doesn't seem to like that either. So, you know, something we could do, of course, it does need a comma here. Maybe it actually would. Now, whenever you see these double lines, it's a delegation issue. And perhaps probably the better way to do it, say, well, just give me a new GUID, you know? Do a GUID there. Okay, so see, there's a GUID. So at least there's something in name, and I don't have to worry about what it should be. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to call this clear that collection.
Yeah, because the collect function is just unrelenting. If you use collect, it's going to just put something in there every time. And if you don't do a clear anywhere, it's just going to keep adding to that thing. Yeah.
So now that we've got that, now if I click on this, I cleared it out and then I redid it. So if I double click on this, you see that we have something in name.
Yeah.
And these are all unique. Of course, the first and last name are not unique. Okay, so now if I go back over here, let's see what the issue is here.
Okay. Expecting a record.
And maybe Power Apps has changed this, either that or I'm having a brain fart here, being live here. So I'm wanting to patch the data source and provide that. Now, alternatively, what you can do, I'm going to comment this out just momentarily. And what we could do is, now if you look at our function list, we're eventually going to get over to, where is ForAll? It's number 15. Okay. So we're actually going to use ForAll right now. Okay. If I get back to my project here, I'll do a ForAll. Now, ForAll is a function you should master because if you ever need to loop through things, this is the way that you loop in Power Apps is by using this ForAll. Okay. Yeah. What do you want to loop through? Well, we want to loop through a table of values or an array of values. And we do have this collection here. Okay. So for each of those, and I always like to use a little alias for the ForAll. I'll say as my. And if you don't use that alias by using the as keyword, you can access the current record that you're going through repeatedly by using a keyword called this record. Every once in a while, I've got a problem with this record. It's like it's confused. Yeah. So what I do is I create my own little keyword, my, to get at that. So the first parameter in the ForAll is what we're going to loop through. And the second parameter is what we're going to do each time around. Okay. So we're going to use that patch function. Okay. And the data source is my students. And we want to have a new record. So we'll say defaults. And what do we want to put in there? Well, we've got name. What do we want to put in name? Well, let's use our little alias, my. Now I did forget to put curly braces in here. So the third parameter for patch always needs curly braces. Curly braces signify, hey, this is a record. Okay. So we're going to have name value pairs. So like how we do in JSON, if you guys have ever worked with JSON, JavaScript object notation is what that stands for. Okay. So name, we want to say my dot, it's not GUID, it's called my dot name, and it will hold a GUID. Okay. So then we got the first name. We'll say my dot first name. Last name, my dot last name. Okay. That should work. Let's try this out. Patch. It's going to go through those three and put those in there. Okay. Now, if I go in and try to edit this data, and let's go do a search for we'll filter. What was the name that we used there? New test person. Let's make sure there's at least 3 records there. There they are. All right. So we've talked about collect, ClearCollect. We've also thrown in another function called clear. You see patch. Okay. And we just did an example of using ForAll. So we're just sort of trucking right along. Now, do you guys have any questions about anything that we've covered so far? Now we'll just keep trucking here. All right. So we've got all that. The next one is filter. Okay. So let's say we only want to filter based on something. Okay. So that something might be, let's bring over a drop-down list. Now, I'll go with what the data says here, okay? So for the data source for the items for this drop-down, I'm going to say distinct, okay? And let's look at the function list over here just real quick, the distinct. Well, do we have a distinct here? Number 14, okay? Distinct will give us a single column table of what's in that data source. Okay, so here I'm going to say my students. Okay, and then for the second parameter, this is going to be the field name. Well, the field name is either gender or sex. There we go, gender. Okay, now if I were to run this, we've got male, female, and a lot of others here. Okay, so what we could do is we could allow the user to click on one of these and then filter the results down here based on that drop-down list, okay? So I'm going to say DRP, which is what we should prefix our drop-down list with, DRP, and we'll call this genders, okay? So I am going to copy that on the clipboard. And then here, let's filter this thing down. So we only want to look at ones that line up with what was selected in the drop-down list, okay? And I am seeing an item, a comment says, what is a GUID? From Andre, what is a GUID? A GUID stands for Globally Unique Identifier, okay? Globally Unique Identifier. So if you do a Google search on GUID, it'll come up and sort of explain what that is. It's supposed to be a unique value there. Okay. So anyhow, so we're going to filter this, and we're going to say gender equals drop-down list dot selected text dot value. Okay. And let's see what comes up here. Okay. So we'll run it, and because we have male selected, we have all the males there. We have female. There's all the females. Oh yeah, look at that. But our little concat thing is sort of dynamically moving around here. So age, gender. So we've got some good data to filter on. Does anybody have any questions about how filtering works? Chances are, if you've been writing any type of apps with Power Apps, you're probably very familiar with filter. It's a very commonly used function. So the first parameter is always the data source. The second parameter is the criteria. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go back over here. So we just used distinct. Any questions on distinct at all? So we covered distinct and filter. And then the next function should be lookup. Okay, so let's do a lookup. So we'll go back here. Now lookup will go and get a record. Now it can get a specific value out of that record. So a record has got many columns or fields, right? So you go get a record, and then let's say there's two records that have the same criteria. Okay, for example, over here in this collection, we created 3 people with this new test person. Okay, new test person. I'm going to copy that. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this a little smaller here. I'm going to insert a label. Look up. Say my students. And the second one will be first name. Okay. That will give us the record itself, but a label isn't going to display a record. A label is going to display a single value out of there. Okay. So we need to provide a third parameter. Okay. So in this case, I want to look at the GUID, because that is something that I know is different between those. But it's not GUID. It's actually in the name field. Okay. So look at this. I'm going to expand this little label. And what it did here was it went and looked at, did a lookup based on this new test person. And this is the GUID. This is the name value out of the ones that came back. Okay. So if I were to go in here, the lookup and the filter work very similarly. Copy that. I could go down here in this gallery, and I could use, instead of lookup, I could change this lookup. Okay. And we would say filter. And filter doesn't need a third parameter there. Okay. So you can see there's 3 of them here. Maybe we'll put another little label on here, and this one will say okay, we could do that. So you see we've got this 30B. So we got 4 records, and it brought back, the lookup brought back the very first record. Even though these other 3 matched, the lookup is always going to find the first record there. We've used lookup. Any questions, comments about lookup? So let's take a look at search. Now I'm going to change the data source back. Search. Let's add over a text box. Typically, when you want to do a search, you want a text box for people can. I do see a question here. Nick says, "Can you add last to lookup?" And you could, but it's not going to work the way that you want to. So, for example, so this lookup finds the very first record. So if you say first or last, there is a table of only one value there, one record. So if you say first or last, there's only one in there. So it's going to give you the same thing. Now, if you want the last of things that match, use filter. Okay, that will give you them all. And then you could say last out of that. Okay, there's actually another function called index. So if you use first to get the first one, or the last for the last one, you could use first in for the first so many, or the last in for the last so many, or you can use index to get at a specific one out of a table. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and the lookup kind of works like a filter, but it's just a dynamic filter, right? Like you're just wanting, if you're not sure where it's at in there, it's going to give you one it's going to filter it down to one record, just like
Yeah.
the last will filter it down to one record, but it's always going to be the last position. First will always be the first position. Lookup will be a different position depending on where it's at in the table where it finds it at. Yeah.
Yeah, the very first one it comes up against. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's look at search. So let's add in a text input. Okay. And what we'll do here, we'll call this txt search. I won't have any text input in there. Okay. And what I want to do is this stuff around here. And let's search. Now we could do one of two things. We could either search the filtered value based on the gender drop down. We could do that. Okay. Or we could just have the full thing, the my students. It really doesn't matter which one you use. Just realize that you can nest them like I am right now. So this is the data source. The next thing is like, okay, what is it you want to search for? Well, whatever they type in the txt search text input dot text, that's what we're looking for. Now the third parameter are all the columns that you want to look in. Okay, so we've got first name, and look at that. It wants us to use this one that's included in double quotes. It's got the CR833. Okay.
Why do they do that, Darren? You know why that is?
Yeah. So if it wants something inside of double quotes like this, because it could be like really, it could be dynamic. Okay. So you know the difference between sort, and then you've got another function called sort by columns. And the sort by columns allows you to sort on multiple columns in a certain way.
Yeah.
Sort by columns expects a string of names for the columns that you want to sort on. The same thing with search. It wants a string of the column names. And because of that, it's going to want, if you're working with Dataverse, you're going to have to include all this stuff, or just pick it from the IntelliSense. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, typically if you need the column names in there and they need to be in double quotes, you're going to have to give it the fully qualified ugly name there. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Good stuff. I never knew why that was the case.
Yeah. And then you just keep on adding more and more columns here. Okay. So we got last name. Oh, look at that. There's the last name. So we'll search for first and last name. And now because I have male selected, it's only going to look in males. Let's see if we have any Johns in here. No Johns. What about, let's go look at, I know we have new test person. Let's just say person. Let's see if that works. Okay. Now they don't have any gender, so that gender hasn't been set. So if I select a blank one, it'll bring him up. You see that? Something that might be good for us to do is we could do something like this. If there's anything in the TXT search, how do we check to see if there's something in it? I use the function called len for length. Okay. If the length is greater than 0, then yeah, let's go ahead and do a search. Okay. So I'll just have that. Otherwise, let's just do what we were doing before, which is this filter.
So now this is a really good example of having total control of your program. It's another good example of that. You're not.
If you're doing you're doing a search for John, you know, it's like just show me everybody. You know, you don't want to have to search for John and then select you know other genders or whatever. You're probably just searching for anyone with the name John. Okay, so let me do a thing here. John. There we go. There's John Doe. Okay, what about Darren? There's a Darren. Okay. So we are using search. Now, whenever I show people search, I always like to show them, you know, you're always going to use a little text input here. You might want in the hint text say, search first or last name, just to let them know what they can do in there. And then also there's another property here called a clear button, So if you turn that on and run this, you start to type like, oh, I don't want that. So instead of making them hit backspace, or select everything and hit delete, they can just click on that X and it takes it right out. Okay. So we just use the search function. Yeah. So, so Andre asks, are delegation issues just to do with the 2000 record limit? That's typically what people are talking about when they're talking about the delegation issues. Now, these functions sometimes, depending upon the data source, are delegable. Some of them are not delegable. Okay. So what my experience has been with Dataverse, when I do a count rows with SharePoint, it has to bring over the data and then count them. And with Dataverse, what my experience is that it can figure out what the count is, even if it's over 2000, and will give me that higher number. Okay, so just sort of keep that in mind, is whenever you're using these functions and you're worried about delegation, is that how delegable a function is depends upon what the data source that you're working with. Okay. Yeah. So Data's King says, I wish I had a clear button for the drop down. Yeah. I wish also, if you like rounded, controls like this text box, that looks nice, right? Well, what about for a drop-down list? Why can't I do a rounded corner for a drop-down list? Maybe eventually they'll do that as well, right? Right. So let's go back to our function list here. So we got search. What about sort? Sort's an easy one. Okay. So if you look at our results set, you notice that they're not really sorted in any fashion right now. So what I like about sort is you see how we've got an if statement. Here we do a search. Here we just do a filter. Well, I like to put search on the very outward portion of all the nesting of functions when you're talking about a data source for something like a gallery. Okay. So what I'll do is a sort. And I love the sort function. It's very nice, simple. Typically, you're just wanting to sort on a single column. Sometimes you want to do more than one, but I'm just going to name off what column I want to sort on. So in this case, let's say last name. And you notice that because I can just reference the is I want to sort on the column without double quotes, well, I don't have to mess with all this CR8033 stuff. And keeping an eye on the comments here. Amber says, we talk about that Power Apps can only deal with 2000 rows of data from a data source. I guess we can add more than one data source in Power Apps and use the data source on another screen. So now we have 4000 rows. Is that possible? Just asking out there. That wouldn't be, yeah, you could do that. You could, the thing is you want to be able to bring back specifically what you're wanting to show or not show in that result set of 2000, Amber. So what's great about collections is you don't have that. So if you want to display, typically, I don't think that's a good type of user interface for the user to experience. Very rarely, if ever, have I ever had a need to display more than 500, 1,000, 2,000 records on a screen all at once. So a lot of times when people hear about that limitation of Power Apps, like, what? Can only handle 2,000 records. Like I've got 20 million records, so whatever on Power Apps, right? And Amber says, but ultimately it will slow down the application. Yeah, if you're working with thousands and thousands of records from the same data source, throwing it all into one collection or different data sources, yeah, the more data you bring over and you load up in memory, it's going to slow down your application. Yeah, absolutely. What you want to do is if you want to process a lot of data, Power Apps really wasn't designed or created to be a data processing engine. I would, if you're going to be doing a lot of that type of stuff, maybe a Power Automate flow. But if you're going to be working with lots of data, I would recommend use something like SQL Server. You can create a database object called a stored procedure and database operations that happen on the SQL Server side in a stored procedure will happen much more quickly than they could happen inside of a Power Automate flow. So something to keep in mind there.
Yeah, it's important to remember that Power Apps is designed to be a front end designing tool. It's not meant to be, like you said, a mass data processor.
Yeah. Data's King says we also have a 500 row limit on dropdowns. We have over 600 employees. Okay, that's good to know. And then also galleries will only load up 100 records at a time, unless you can display more than 100, then it will try to load up more. But yeah, just trying to be as efficient as possible, try to help you along. So yeah. All right, so we've done sort. Now what we could do, there's another function called sort by columns. Okay, so if you want to sort on, let's say you've got a lot of people with the last name of Smith. Well, you might want to start sorting on their first name. So right here, last name, it doesn't like last name there. Okay, it wants to include it in double quotes. There's last name. And if you want to sort it by first name there, start typing first name. And hoping it was going to give me this thing right here. It's not. So I'm going to copy the first name as well. Okay, there we go. So delegation is a big topic. Perhaps we could have a whole lesson or a whole series of lessons on delegation, dealing with delegation, and designing your database in a way so that you don't have any delegation issues. Okay, so yeah, so somebody here in the comments, Elias, I got a delegation with sort with no delegation warning. I had to split the sort. Use the sort twice instead of combined. Yeah. So if it's going to sort a result set and it doesn't have all the records to sort by, then yeah. So for example, we have 10,000 records of students out there in that database table, and we try to sort descendingly. We want to start with the Z's, and it went and got the first 2,000 records. So it started with the A's. So if you have hundreds of people with A's and B's that their names start with, and then you try to sort it, you're going to start with the B's or the C's or the B's first, and then get down to the A's. You're not going to start with the Z's. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you really need to understand at what point do these functions like sort of kick in and start working, you know? So some of these functions are delegable and some are not, and it can change based on the data source. Okay. All right. So let's move on here. Something I should mention about the sort, it's a little important here. So if you, I just mentioned it actually. So if you want the last name to be sorted descending, okay, then you would actually type it here. Yeah, see it says column and then order. And I think there's an enumerated value for that now. I can't just say descending. Okay, maybe it's called sort order dot descending, something along those lines. The sort by, let's see if I can, but yeah, I'm used to just typing descending and it gives me that. Keep an eye on the comments here. The way that I was able to show all of the employees, I used the checkbox to separate the drop-down list of non-exempt employee from exempt employees. Okay, very good. Yeah, it's called sort order dot ascending. I did use these. Let's just see if this is trying to force it to be the very last parameter. Not so. Yeah, you should be. I'm just looking at the documentation here, guys. I'm going to put the documentation link over here in the chat just in case you want to look at it. Yeah, sort order dot ascending. Yeah, so there's my sort order, right? Dot ascending. Maybe it just wants me to type it all. Okay, so it's giving me red squigglies. Here we go. Does not exist. Now, what were to happen if I were to close down this project and reopen it? It would probably work fine, right? Unless you guys see something that I'm not seeing here. Otherwise, I'm a little inclined just to move on here. So let me go back to just a regular sort. And I'm going to say last name. Okay, see there it's working fine, but it should also work on the sort by columns as well. So collapse this up a little more here. It's a little too. Come on. There we go. Bring that up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I agree with the commenter here, the viewer. Delegation is not a big problem. If you have some experience, you can solve 99% of the problems. And that's been my experience. So let's say if we're looking at a big, we're trying to connect to data, and there's thousands upon thousands of rows. What I try to do is I try to slim things down so it's manageable. There's no reason to display thousands and thousands of records on the screen. What you want to do is sort of pre-qualify what it is that you want to see. In a lot of cases, the stakeholders, the people that are speccing out the application, they only want to see the last 90 days worth of data. They don't want to look at the 20-year-old history of the data. So if you nest your filters in a way to the most delegable to the least delegable functions, typically you can, as they said here, you can solve 99% of the delegation issues by structuring and nesting those filter functions in a particular way. Okay, so
also Power Apps is still developing things, and as they develop, I'm noticing that they are becoming they're bringing in they're creating more versatility within these functions so that there's more delegability within these functions, right? That's a hard word to say 3 times. Delegability.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking through all these. Okay, lookup, search, sort, distinct, ForAll. Okay, now we're in the last stretch here. What about GroupBy? That's interesting. GroupBy. You guys ever worked with GroupBy before? Okay, so what I want to do here is I don't have a column for country, but what I would like to do is create a column for the country code. So in a phone number, if it's got like +1, I know that's for the United States. So I'm going to use a culmination of a lot of these functions. I'm going to create a new column and I'm going to populate it. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I can close down some of these things here. I don't know that I need all this stuff. Okay. Here is my table. Okay, my students. I'm going to create a new column, and I'm going to call this country phone code. A single line of text will be fine, and I'll save it. Okay, so that's going to be out there. It's going to be a blank string for now. And so this is the city. Maybe we can sort of make some of these things a little smaller here so we've got more space to work with. So let's click here. I'm going going to try to make my screen bigger so you guys can see more of this. Okay, so for this label here, what I want to do is get at this phone. Okay, now what I want to get at is I don't want the plus. I just want the number right after the plus and before the space. That's what I want to get at. So there are a few ways to do this, okay? So what I want to do is, see, some of them, the codes are 3 and some of them are 2. So what I'm going to do is use some of these functions that we're already worked with. So let's do a split. We'll do a split on space. Okay. Now I want to look at the first one. Okay. And then I'm going to say dot value. There we go. But we don't want the plus sign. So we could, I do a lot of times, is substitute. Okay. So there's what we're working with from the get-go. We're going to substitute any plus signs with an empty string. And also, do we have any spaces in here at all? I'll put a little star, and it doesn't look like we have any spaces after the numbers, so that's good. Otherwise, we can do a trim and trim out any spaces, some leading and trailing spaces. Okay, now the use of these functions here that I just did, does that all make sense? Is all that clear? I didn't want to glib over that without fully explaining things, you know? Right. So we've got that. Now, how do I put that into my database for that new column there? Okay, well, one thing that we could do is we could create, and now we've got about 1,000 records here. Okay, now I could write a loop that will loop through everything and update the code for each one. Okay, we could do that. The more efficient way is to patch them all at once. I try to do a patch the collection before. Do you remember this thing down here? I commented out because it wasn't working. Right. What I want to do is I'm going to retry that and see if I can do it all in one shot. Okay, so what I'm going to do is update country code. Okay, let's make that a little bigger there. Okay, so inside of this, what I want to do is do a ClearCollect. Collection is going to be call temp students. Okay. And we'll go get my students. All the students, and put them there inside of that collection. Okay. Now, what we could do, we should probably refresh the data source, right? Since we added, since we added that new column, I want to make sure that's in there. So I'll do a refresh here. So we haven't yet populated this. Now what I want to do is will be one step. The next step will be for all, and that's going to work on this collection here that we just populated. And then inside for each record that we go through there, we can patch, and patching in-memory collections is so much faster than trying to patch something that's actually tied to the data. So it's sort of good that we're doing it this way here. So we're going to patch. Now remember that for all, I always use that little alias as and get at a specific record. I'm going to patch collection. it allows me to do that because it may not allow me to patch something inside of a loop if we're using that item to loop at the top. So I'll try it, see if it works. So we're going to patch that, and then we're going to be using the my, which should be that record there. And then we've got some type of country phone code. Okay, that country phone code right here. So let's copy that. Okay, but instead of this item, which is what you use inside of a gallery, let's use my phone. Okay, now what does that run? It cannot, the function cannot operate on the same data source that is used in the ForAll. Okay, so what we could do, we could have another collection that has exact same data in there called temp students 2. And we don't have to go back to the database for that because it's already right here, right? Okay, so now we got 2 collections. Now, inside the collection, we'll actually update the second collection. Look, it's gonna allow us to do that now. Okay. Now we don't have any data in here just yet because it hasn't run yet. And so we'll go through now. Now we updated the collection. Now at the bottom of this, what I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do is do a whole patch. We're going to patch the my students, and we're going to use the new data of this call temp student 2. Okay. So this is the type of stuff that you might want to do or need to do if you need to do some massaging of the data or sort of clean up the data. There might be some stuff like this that you might do inside of Power Apps. Okay. Nick says Mego. Or what does Mego stand for?
I don't. My eyes glaze over.
Did I lose you guys at all? Okay, let's recap. Okay, that might help. Let's recap, guys. So what we did was inside of our data source here for all the students, obviously we have people in other countries, okay? So look at all these weird cities we have. Some of them are spelled. I don't even know if those are real names of cities or not, okay? But for the phone number, we do have a phone number in here somewhere. I'm just looking for a horizontal scroll bar or something where I can move around. Might have to do a refresh. Okay. And now we do. Okay. Do you see that? We don't have, no, we created this new column, country phone code, and we have a state, but we don't have a country. So let's say we were given this data and they didn't have any of the country codes. Well, what we could do is we create this country phone code that will populate. But what we want to do is we're going to grab the little country code and put it over there. And then later on, we could have a list of countries and all the country codes for those countries and have a one-to-many relationship there. We could do that. Okay. Or we could add another column called country and actually populate it based on that. So that's what we're trying to do. And then this is how we're doing it. Okay, so I'm curious to see if this all works. Okay. And I might want to break this up into several steps just to make sure that things are working properly before we go through it all. Okay, so I'm not going to do this patch at the end. I want to make sure all these previous other steps are working properly. So the first thing is we're going to go to the data source, get the my students, drop it into that collection. Now we need a copy of it because we have a limitation within Power Apps. We can't update something that we're looping through. So we created a second one that has the exact same data. We loop through it and we make sure this country phone code is actually populated so we can use it later. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. We'll hit the button. Let's see how long this takes. Oh, that didn't take very long at all. So here's a question. We got a little count label here. Oh, it's the name of our, there's new students. What's temp students? Okay. Okay, so we have 1,004. Okay. Oh my goodness. Get that out of the way. Copy, paste. And then in students 2, okay, we should have the exact same amount of records, and we do. Okay, so now what we're going to do, isn't that wild? It didn't take very much time to actually execute that. Now the question is, how long will it take to actually patch those 1,000 records? I'm going to hit save. I'm going to run. I'm going to hit update country code. So while that's running, questions, comments? Data is King says, if you want to master these functions, you need to know the art of combining these functions together. Absolutely. Comments should be mandatory when doing this. I agree with that. If you're going to be writing a lot of code there, writing comments for each step would be a great idea. Absolutely. It is taking a while. But this isn't something that you'll have the user do a lot. This might be like a data maintenance screen or something that you do just to sort of manipulate the data to get it situated, like a one-time type of thing. And
right, but there's a lot of times you're going to do these kinds of operations if you're doing this for very long, because you're constantly, one thing that we know is that data gets messed up a lot, and you're always going to be cleaning data up. You're going to have to do these kinds of operations to go through and scrub your data, or massage your data, or shape your data. There's all kinds of different operations that are going to do these kinds of things.
yeah. So the button came back, which means, okay, it's done, but these dots are still moving, which makes me think it's still sort of, maybe it's bringing the data back to refresh it. I don't know, but I know that I can go here and let me just refresh this and see if we've got some good country phone codes there now. Okay, so let me use this scroll bar here. Now, where we don't have a country phone code is these places where we didn't have a phone to begin with, which are these new test records that were added. But for everything else, if I load up the 994 records, we should have some good data here. Look at that. Isn't that nice?
Right, and that's an example of what I was talking about too. You see all those blanks in there. You may not want, when you're doing certain operations, you might want to filter out all that blank stuff, as you're working with your data. So,
So I wanted to make sure we got some good data for that, because I want to do a group by.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to do a group by. So let's, I think I might be inclined to duplicate this data screen. So I might want to rip some things out and keep some others. Okay, just as we move along so it doesn't get all really complicated here. Okay, so let's take all that out. And for here, I think I'm going to just take all this out for now. I'm going to keep the my students. Okay, so we've got that. Okay, so there's our data again. And GroupBy function. So let's say we've got a listing of all of our students and they're in different countries. Let's say we want um, them to be grouped or bunched up by a particular column, like the country code that we just came up with, right? And then within that, they're sorted within those groupings. Okay, so let's say group by, okay, parenthesis. So the source is the my students. So I'm going to indent that over. Now, what column name do we want to group by? Okay, well, let's do that country code. Code. Okay, so that's the country code that we're going to go by. And then the third one is the group name. So the group name will be a country code. Okay, so that should give us a data source that's been grouped. Now let's take a look at the data we have here down below. I need to zoom out to get a hold of this bottom here and bring it up, and then zoom back in. Okay, so here's all the country codes, and then all of them that match up that are grouped based on that country code, they're a table of values.
Oh,
Table
wow.
of values.
Wow.
And that, okay, so we might actually want to, let's say for this last one, we'll say this item dot country phone code. Okay, so there's that. And I'm wondering if I could sort based on that. Sort based on the code. Okay. I like that.
See you, Lou. So when you say it's a table of values, does that just mean just the value field, or does that mean all the fields that are in that record?
I believe it has all of the fields. Yeah. And we'll take a look at that here in just a second here.
Okay.
Okay, so we want to sort. So like that. And it looks like it did. Okay, so yeah, one's at the top. So one's United States. Okay, I like that. So here we've got this item, and we've got two columns. We've got that country code, and then we've got the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so okay. So typically what you want to know is like the count of how many are in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these labels out that are giving me issues. Okay. And what I want to do here is say, I'm going to see that table value. Select a country code. Yeah, I'm expecting to see that. Students. Let's see if it helps me out here. Count rows. No. I don't want to do it like that. Got the column name and then the group name. He wants both of those there. This item, entry code. There we go. Now that gives us the table value by saying country code. Okay, so you see we got 30. Oh my goodness, we got 37 people in the United States. You see all that?
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, is somebody got slick with this? If they could cheat the delegation issues with that,
Yeah.
would that be a good? Do you think that'd be a good tool for that?
Give me an example.
Well, okay. So I'm just, this is the first time I've really seen it work like this. So this is kind of neat for me.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking, let's say you have 5,000 records and you got to start doing, if you did a group by, then now you've got individual tables within that now. So if you could do a count and then do another nest, or not a count, but if you could say do a lookup for the group, and then inside the group do a lookup within that group. Well, now you don't have 5,000 records you're working with now. Now you're working with 40 groups, maybe. You take that 5,000 records and you broke it down to 40 different groups, and you work within that. Does that make sense what I'm saying to you, Darren?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I don't think you can get around delegation issues with that.
Okay.
But I am going to look it up just real quick, just in case I'm wrong on that. Otherwise, people would be using that all the time. I've never heard of people using it to get around, but
that would be smooth, man, if you could do that.
Yeah, because the GroupBy actually performs it once it comes back over.
Okay. So my next question, Darren, because you're a SQL Server master, can SQL Server do groups, and could you set up your stuff in the groups so that you could Power Apps could consume it? So if you had 5,000 records consumed within SQL Server,
yeah, you do the groups right there inside of a view.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I've actually
there we go. Boy, I tell you what, Power Apps just got a lot more powerful right there for me. Absolutely, it did.
Yeah. So yeah, the GroupBy isn't used. Like you probably won't use that every day, but it's good to know about it because every once in a while you'll need to do some type of like a reporting screen, and you're not using Power BI. They just want a screen on there that's going to give them stats on, let's say, if you're writing an app that keeps track of a call center. Okay, give me a list of all the 20 call center agents and how many phone calls they've taken a day.
Yeah,
so you would do a group on that.
Yeah,
without having to do a count inside of your gallery all the time.
So many reports. I remember the old days we used to have crystal reports, and you used to have to design groups, right? You had to break it down into groups. Like if you're doing a time clock, like you just got done talking about. There's just so many operations for reporting that you need groups.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at this again here. So we got GroupBy. Okay, so remove and RemoveIf. That is a way, I don't know why they didn't call it delete, because that's exactly what it does, is it deletes something, okay? Deletes a record. So let's go back over to this screen where we've got all this data here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click a little icon. Let's call this, I'm looking for the trash icon. So I'll click on that. A lot of times I like to make it either a red or a maroon color. Okay, sometimes the pure red is a little too harsh. And what we could do here for the select is we could say remove. Now the first parameter to remove is the data source. Okay, so this is my students. Okay, and then the second parameter is, okay, which record do you want to delete? Yeah. So in that case, we could just say this item. That gives you the underlying current record. Okay. And it's as simple as that. So if I run this and we have Dickie, there we go. They're gone. Now here's a question. What if we go down here and we're no longer servicing people in, let's say any people that don't have a country code, maybe it's junk data. Okay. So what we could do is we could bring over a button here and we'll say delete junk data. Okay. So what we could do here is remove if, and this is going to look a lot like a filter statement. So we've got the data source, which is my students. Criteria is blank on what column? That country code. Country code, country phone code. So if that's blank, it's going to delete them. Okay. So I'm going to run this. See at the bottom, we've got 6 of those. I'm going to click on this button here. Okay. Look at that. It's gone. So remove and RemoveIf are fairly straightforward, simple things. Now, Kurt, in designing your applications, do you like to allow users just to click buttons to delete data? What are your thoughts on that?
You always want to do a validation on there, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're somebody like me and I haven't had my coffee in the morning, I'm clicking around and I hit the trash can. Oh, I didn't mean to hit the trash can. You know? Yeah.
Or say, hey, are you really sure you want to delete?
Right.
Thousands of records, maybe that's gonna.
And you might want to say, are you sure? And then when you say yes, are you really, really sure? And are you really, really, really sure?
Yeah. Okay, what about update and UpdateIf? Now, I do like UpdateIf. I don't really care for update all that much, and I'm going to move my head out of this here.
Yeah, I've never used either one of these.
Yeah, update. So update is a lot like patch. Okay, so you give it a data source, you give it a record, and you can specify all the values that you want to update that record with. Now, what update does, how it's different than patch, is it actually replaces the record, where patch is very surgical. It's like, okay, I want to update this record. I want to change this one little column to this value, this column to this value. Okay, do an update, it's going to replace, and if you leave columns out, it's going to throw in null values in those things.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't like update that much, but UpdateIf does not have that blanket type of way of updating it. What it is, it's you give it a criteria. So if, let's say we had those 6 people with those country codes of blank, we can say UpdateIf for every one of those that has a country code of blank. Okay. Well, let's make sure we have some with some country codes of blank. So I'm going to say collect patch. So we've got some with some codes there. I'm going to go down here and see if we have those. Now we have 5 people without any country codes. Okay. Let's say most of the people that come in are from the United States. And if they have a blank country code, I want them to have a code of 1. Okay. So what we could do is, instead of delete junk data, we could have update junk data. We'll actually fix it. We'll massage the data, sanitize it. Okay. So instead of RemoveIf, we'll say UpdateIf. If it's blank, I want to update that country phone code to be 1. Now when I run it, before I hit the button, notice that we have 37 people here. And if I click on this button, it will go off and update those 6 records. And then we should have 6 more. Okay. If I scroll down, they're gone. So what do you guys think of all that?
So I got a question there about that.
Sure.
I think I understood that you were saying the update, it will actually do the entire record, and if you don't put values in there, it will just put null values in the fields that you don't request. In the update if, it doesn't do that. In the update if, it'll just update the field that you specified within that criteria.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that. Okay, so that is kind of powerful then. So it is a little surgery thing. Just only update this field with this data for that field. Don't check this field and then update the entire record. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm keeping an eye on all these comments coming in. Jeff says, covering these functions has given me several more ideas on how to construct my app. That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And
I always worry about the balance within these live presentations. When we're talking about for beginners, a beginner venue, I don't want to blow people out of the water that are true beginners. I also know that you guys aren't going to be true beginners for very long. But I like the idea of exposing people to these more complicated functions, knowing that we're going to go into it deeper somewhere down the road, so that you don't go, oh my God, I can't get this. And then you just don't want to do Power Apps anymore.
Yeah, it's like too intimidating or something like that. So guys, so Kurt has a good series, a beginner level series. I think the very first name of the video that you have out there is Look How Easy This Is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you sort of step through and talk about, showing how easy it is and how it really shouldn't be intimidating for you guys to sort of get on them and make progress on your first app and become familiar with Power Apps. So,
yeah.
So I do have one request for you guys. Are you ready for this?
If you're getting anything helpful out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks
for coming, guys.
For some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry, click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's gonna autoplay some other video, which you probably don't want.